They thought I was the pushover daughter who'd never fight back. Until I walked into my sister's wedding reception as the new owner of the venue and handed them an eviction notice. I'm Sarah, 28 years old, and for most of my life, I believed that being the reliable one meant accepting less. While my younger sister Emma threw tantrums to get designer clothes, I worked part-time jobs through high school and saved every penny for college. While she partied through a communications degree that my parents fully funded, I earned my accounting certification while working full-time at a local firm. While she moved back home after graduation and treated our house like a personal hotel, I quietly sent money every month to help my parents with their mortgage. You see, I'd always been the one they called when something needed fixing. When Dad's truck broke down, I covered the repair bill. When Mom needed surgery and insurance didn't cover everything, I emptied my savings account without a word. When Emma crashed her car senior year of college, guess who got the call at 2 in the morning to wire money for a replacement? They never asked these things of me directly. It was always presented as a temporary loan, a family emergency, something they'd pay back when things got better. But things never got better for them. They just got more comfortable with my money solving their problems. The worst part wasn't the money itself. It was the way they talked about me at family dinners, like I wasn't sitting right there. Emma would complain about her retail job, and Mom would sigh and say, well, not everyone can be practical like Sarah. Dad would joke that I was born middle-aged because I preferred saving money to going out. They made my reliability sound like a character flaw. Like there was something wrong with me for not demanding the same attention and resources they showered on Emma. I told myself it was okay because I had something they didn't know about. Something that made all their casual disrespect bearable. My grandmother, my father's mother, had left me her entire estate when she passed away 3 years ago. Grandma Rose had watched the family dynamics for decades. She'd seen how my parents favored Emma, how they expected me to be the responsible one while never acknowledging what that cost me. In her final months, when I was the only one who visited her twice a week, she pulled me aside and said something I'll never forget. Sarah, honey, you have a good heart, but don't let them mistake your kindness for weakness. This family takes and takes from you because you let them. Someday you're going to need to show them what you're really worth. Her estate was worth $450,000. The will stated clearly that the inheritance was mine alone, with one condition. It would be held in trust until my 30th birthday or until I got married, whichever came first. The lawyer explained that Grandma Rose wanted to ensure I had time to mature and make wise decisions about such a substantial amount. My parents knew about the inheritance, of course. They'd been present when the will was read. But what they didn't realize was how much I already knew about money, about investments, about building wealth quietly while everyone else focused on spending. Working in accounting had taught me how to recognize financial patterns. And the pattern in my family was crystal clear. Emma was the princess. I was the piggy bank, and my parents were the enablers who made it all possible. For 3 years, I never mentioned the inheritance. I continued sending money when they needed it, continued being the reliable daughter, continued watching Emma live consequence-free while I worked overtime to cover everyone else's emergencies. I told myself I was being patient, that when I turned 30 or got married, everything would change. I'd finally have the financial security to set boundaries, to say no, to demand the respect I'd never received. But Emma's engagement changed everything. She met Trevor at some networking event, a guy whose family owned a chain of high-end restaurants. Within 6 months, they were engaged, and Emma was planning what she called the wedding of the century. She wanted everything: a designer dress, a string quartet, flowers flown in from Ecuador, a reception for 300 people at the most exclusive venue in our city. The venue alone cost $30,000. I remember the family dinner where she announced her plans. Emma spread brochures across the dining room table like she was planning a royal coronation. I know it's expensive, she said, though her tone suggested she didn't find this problematic. But this is a once-in-a-lifetime event. We can't have my wedding at some church basement. Mom was practically glowing. Oh, sweetheart, you deserve everything. Don't worry about the cost. We'll figure it out. Dad nodded along. already mentally calculating, I'm sure, how much they could borrow against the house. How much they could ask me to contribute as my gift to Emma. Actually, Emma said. And I noticed how she avoided looking at me directly. Trevor's family is covering most of it. But there are some upfront costs we need to handle before his parents' money comes through. The venue requires a deposit next week. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. How much? 50,000. She said it like it was nothing. Like $50,000 was pocket change you'd find in your couch cushions. The silence stretched until Dad cleared his throat. We'll need to liquidate some investments. Mom was twisting her wedding ring, a nervous habit she'd had since I was a child. Or maybe, Sarah, honey, we've been thinking about your inheritance. Grandma Rose always intended for that money to benefit the whole family. Maybe this is the perfect opportunity to access it early. I stared at her. Access it early? Well, you're getting married eventually, right? Emma jumped in. And when you do, you'll get the money anyway. This way, it helps the family now when we really need it. But I wasn't getting married. I wasn't even dating anyone seriously. And even if I was, the idea that my inheritance was somehow family money made my hands shake with anger I couldn't express. I can't access it until I'm 30, I said quietly. Actually, Dad said, and I could tell he'd been researching this, we spoke to a lawyer. If there's a family emergency, the trustee has some discretion. They'd been planning this. While I was working overtime to pay their bills, they were plotting how to get their hands on money that wasn't theirs. This isn't an emergency, I said. It's a wedding. Emma's face flushed. It's not just a wedding, Sarah. It's the most important day of my life. I'm sorry that you can't understand how significant this is, but some of us actually have dreams bigger than balancing spreadsheets. That was the moment. The exact moment when something broke inside me. Not the insult itself, I'd heard variations of that my whole life. It was the way she said it, like my career was something to be ashamed of, like my practical nature was a personal failing. It was the way my parents nodded along, like they agreed that my dreams were somehow smaller, less important, less worthy of family investment. I excused myself from dinner and drove home to my small apartment, the one I could have furnished better if I hadn't been subsidizing their lifestyle for years. I sat on my second-hand couch and stared at the wall, feeling something I'd never allowed myself to feel before. Rage. Pure, clean, clarifying rage. They thought they could take my inheritance to pay for Emma's fairy tale wedding. They thought I was too passive, too grateful for their love, too afraid of conflict to fight back. They'd mistaken my kindness for stupidity, my generosity for unlimited availability. They were wrong. The next morning, I called in sick to work and drove to the law office that handled Grandma Rose's estate. I'd met with Mr. Peterson, the trustee, a few times over the years for routine paperwork, but this conversation was different. My family wants to access my inheritance early, I told him. They say there's a provision for family emergencies. Mr. Peterson adjusted his glasses and pulled up my file. There is a hardship clause, yes, but it requires documentation of genuine financial distress. Medical bills, unemployment, foreclosure proceedings, not discretionary spending. What about wedding expenses? He almost smiled, definitely not wedding expenses. Miss Sarah, your grandmother was very specific about protecting this inheritance from exactly this kind of pressure. She predicted your family might try something like this. I felt a strange mix of grief and gratitude. Even from the grave, Grandma Rose was protecting me. But Mr. Peterson continued, there's something else you should know, your grandmother's estate has been invested conservatively over the past 3 years. The current value is approximately $620,000. My inheritance had grown by over $150,000. Money that could change my life completely. Money that could give me the independence I'd never had. Is there any way to access it now? Legally? Well, marriage would trigger the release, or you could wait 18 months until your 30th birthday. But Miss Sarah, may I offer some advice? Your grandmother spent a lot of time talking about you in her final months. She was worried about your family taking advantage of your generous nature. Whatever pressure they're putting on you, remember that this money represents her love and her desire to see you build your own life. I thanked him and left the office with a plan forming in my mind. But first, I needed to know exactly how far my family was willing to go. That evening, I called my mother. Mom, I've been thinking about what you said about the inheritance. I want to help with Emma's wedding, but I need to understand the numbers. How much are you actually short? The relief in her voice was palpable. Oh, sweetheart, I knew you'd come through. We need about 60,000 total, 50 for the venue deposit and 10 for some other upfront costs, and this is just the deposit. Well, yes. The venue balance is another 30,000, due 2 weeks before the wedding, and there are other vendors. As she talked, I realized they weren't just planning to use my inheritance for a deposit. They were planning to drain the entire thing for Emma's wedding. $600,000, my grandmother's legacy, my future security, all of it disappearing into one day of celebration for the sister who'd never contributed a penny to family emergencies. Mom, what happens after the wedding? I mean, how will you pay me back? A long pause. Well, honey, it's not really about paying back. This is family money. When you get married, we'll help with your wedding too. But she couldn't promise $60,000 for my hypothetical future wedding because they didn't have $60,000. They had my inheritance and they'd convinced themselves they were entitled to it. Let me think about it, I said. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Grandma Rose, about the years I'd spent being the family's financial safety. Net about Emma's casual cruelty and my parents' willful blindness to how they'd failed me. But I also thought about something else, something that had been nagging at me since dinner the night before. Emma had mentioned the venue by name, Rosewood Manor. It was the most exclusive wedding venue in our area, a restored Victorian mansion, with manicured gardens and a reputation for hosting society weddings. I'd driven past it countless times, always admiring its elegant architecture and wondering what kind of people got married in places like that. The next day, I did something I'd never done before. I called in a personal day and drove to Rosewood Manor. The venue was even more beautiful up close. Rolling lawns, mature oak trees, a grand stone facade that spoke of old money and timeless elegance. I told the receptionist I was interested in possibly booking an event and asked for a tour. The events coordinator, a polished woman named Helen, walked me through the main ballroom, the bridal suite, the gardens where ceremonies were held. Everything was perfect, from the crystal chandeliers to the hand-carved moldings. I could see why Emma wanted this place. It was the kind of venue that would make anyone feel like royalty for a day. It's beautiful, I told Helen as we finished the tour. But I have to ask, how long has the venue been for sale? Helen looked surprised. For sale? We're not for sale. Oh, I'm sorry. I thought I saw a listing somewhere. Must have been mistaken. But as we talked, Helen mentioned something interesting. Rosewood Manor was owned by an elderly couple who'd been running it as a wedding venue for 30 years. They were considering retirement but hadn't found the right buyer, someone who would maintain the property's elegance and reputation. I left Rosewood Manor with an idea that was either brilliant or completely insane. That evening, I called a real estate agent. Within a week, I knew everything about Rosewood Manor's financial situation. The owners, Richard and Margaret Sterling, were asking $2 million for the property, but they'd been on the market quietly for over a year. The wedding venue business was profitable, but it required constant attention and physical stamina that the Sterlings, both in their 70s, no longer had. More importantly, I learned that Emma's wedding was scheduled for May 15th, exactly 3 months away. I spent the next 2 weeks researching everything I could about the wedding venue business, about property management, about the local market for event spaces. I called Mr. Peterson to discuss the investment potential of real estate, and he mentioned that if I were to get married, I could access my inheritance immediately. That's when the final piece of my plan clicked into place. I drove to City Hall on a Wednesday afternoon and filed paperwork for a legal name change. Nothing dramatic, just adding my grandmother's maiden name as a middle name. The process would take 30 days, but it would provide documentation of a significant life change. Then I scheduled another meeting with Mr. Peterson. I've been thinking about what you said. I told him about the inheritance representing my grandmother's desire to see me build my own life. I think I'm ready to do that. That's wonderful, Miss Sarah. What are you thinking? I want to start a business. Event planning and venue management. I found a property that would be perfect, but I need to move quickly. The current owners are motivated to sell. Mr. Peterson leaned back in his chair. That's ambitious. And expensive. What kind of investment are we talking about? About 800,000 total. Purchase price, renovations, working capital. That's more than your inheritance. I know. But I've been approved for a business loan that would cover the difference. The property already generates revenue, so the cash flow would support the debt service. What I didn't tell him was that the business loan was contingent on me having substantial equity to invest. What I also didn't tell him was that I'd been dating someone casually for the past 6 months, a coworker named James who'd been hinting about getting more serious. James was a good man, steady and kind, and when I'd tentatively brought up the possibility of marriage, he'd been enthusiastic. Not because of my inheritance, he didn't know about that, but because he'd been thinking the same thing. We had a small ceremony at City Hall on February 14th. My parents and Emma were confused by the sudden marriage, but they were too focused on wedding planning to ask many questions. They assumed it was a financial decision, a way for me to file joint tax returns or share health insurance. They had no idea it was a strategic decision that would change everything. The inheritance was released to me on February 21st. By March 1st, I'd made an offer on Rosewood Manor. By March 15th, I was the owner of the venue where Emma's wedding was scheduled to take place. The previous owners were so relieved to find a buyer who appreciated the property's history and promised to maintain its standards that they agreed to stay on for 2 months to help with the transition. They taught me everything about running the business, from coordinating with vendors to managing the staff to handling the financial side of event planning. But the most important thing they taught me was that as the owner, I had the right to cancel any event for any reason with appropriate notice. Emma's deposit had been paid to the previous owners. Legally, I owed her nothing. The confrontation happened exactly as I'd planned it. Emma's wedding was on a Saturday in mid-May. The ceremony was scheduled for 4 o'clock, followed by cocktails in the garden and dinner in the main ballroom. I knew the timeline because I'd spent the previous month studying every detail of their event contract. I arrived at Rosewood Manor at 10 in the morning, 4 hours before the ceremony was set to begin. Emma was already there with her bridal party, getting ready in the bridal suite. My parents were directing the florists and caterers, acting like they owned the place. Trevor's family was scattered around the grounds, taking photos and admiring the venue they thought their money had secured. I found my parents first, Sarah. Mom rushed over when she saw me. I'm so glad you're here early. Did you bring your camera? We want to get some family photos before the ceremony. Actually, I need to talk to you and Dad privately. Something in my tone made her pause. Dad noticed the conversation and walked over. What's wrong, honey? He asked. I took a breath. I'm the new owner of Rosewood Manor, the words hung in the air. Dad blinked. Mom stared at me like I'd spoken in a foreign language. What do you mean? Mom asked. I mean, I bought this venue 2 months ago, and I'm here to inform you that Emma's wedding is cancelled. Dad's face went through several expressions. Confusion, disbelief, and finally anger. That's not possible. We have a contract. You have a contract with the previous owners who sold the property to me. I'm under no obligation to honor contracts made before my ownership. But the wedding is today. The guests are coming. The caterers are already here. Yes, it's unfortunate timing. But you'll need to vacate the premises immediately. Emma appeared in the doorway of the bridal suite, still in her robe, her hair half-styled. What's going on? Why are you yelling? Mom turned to her, tears starting to form. Sarah says she owns the venue. She says the wedding is cancelled. Emma stared at me for a long moment. Then she laughed. Very funny, Sarah. What are you really doing here? I'm serious. I own Rosewood Manor and you're trespassing. The laughter died on Emma's lips. That's impossible. You don't have that kind of money? Actually, I do. I use my inheritance. The one you thought you could spend on your wedding. The color drained from Emma's face. But we needed that money. We had an agreement. No, you had a plan to take money that wasn't yours. There's a difference. Dad stepped forward, his voice tight with anger. Sarah, stop this nonsense. You can't just cancel your sister's wedding. Do you have any idea how much money we've spent? About $60,000 from what Mom told me, plus whatever Trevor's family contributed. It's a shame you'll lose that money, but that's what happens when you make financial commitments you can't afford. We can afford it? Emma shrieked. We were using family money. You were using my money without my permission. The money my grandmother left specifically to me because she knew this family would try to take advantage of my generosity. Trevor appeared next to Emma, looking confused and increasingly concerned. What's happening here? Emma grabbed his arm. Sarah says she owns the venue. She says our wedding is cancelled. Trevor looked at me like I was insane. You can't just cancel a wedding. We have vendors, guests, contracts. I can and I am. You have 30 minutes to collect your belongings and leave my property. Your property? Trevor's voice rose. Who the hell do you think you are? I'm the woman who's been subsidizing this family's lifestyle for years while being treated like a second-class citizen. I'm the woman who was supposed to hand over her entire inheritance so Emma could play princess for a day. And I'm the woman who bought this venue specifically to prevent that from happening. Emma started crying then, not the delicate tears of a distressed bride, but ugly, angry sobs. You can't do this to me. This is my wedding day. Everyone's coming. My dress, the flowers, everything is perfect. Then you should have thought about that before deciding my inheritance was your piggy bank. Dad was turning red, the way he did when he was about to lose his temper completely. Sarah, you're being selfish and vindictive. This is your sister. Family helps family. Family helps family when it's mutual, when it's respectful, when it's appreciated. This family has been helping itself to my money and my labor for years while treating me like hired help. That ends today. But where will we have the wedding? Mom asked, her voice breaking. The guests are already on their way. That's not my problem. Emma lunged toward me then, and for a moment I thought she might actually hit me. You're jealous. You're jealous because I'm beautiful and I found someone who loves me and you're stuck in your boring little life. I'm not jealous, Emma. I'm tired. I'm tired of being taken for granted. I'm tired of being treated like my feelings don't matter. I'm tired of watching you get everything handed to you while I work for everything I have. You don't work for anything. You sit at a desk all day. I sit at a desk all day earning money that I've been using to pay this family's bills for years. Money that made it possible for you to live at home rent-free while you figured out your life. Money that covered Dad's truck repairs and Mom's medical bills and your car accident and a dozen other emergencies that somehow became my responsibility. The truth was finally out in the open, and the silence that followed was deafening. Trevor was staring at Emma like he was seeing her for the first time. You've been living off your sister's money? It's not like that, Emma started, but her voice was weak. It's exactly like that, I said. And today it stops. I turned to address the small crowd that had gathered bridesmaids, groomsmen, vendors who'd stopped working to watch the drama unfold. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm the new owner of Rosewood Manor, and I'm canceling today's event. You have 30 minutes to collect your belongings and vacate the premises. The catering company can bill me for the food. It will be donated to a local shelter. The florist can take the arrangements or leave them, whatever's easier. But this venue is now closed for private business. Sarah, Mom pleaded, please don't do this. We can work something out. We can pay you back. With what money, Mom? You've never had money. You've had my money. And now that's over. I walked away then, leaving them to figure out their own mess. I had work to do. The vendor coordination took about an hour. Most of them were professional about it, understanding that venue ownership changes happen and contracts sometimes get cancelled. The caterer was actually relieved. They'd been dealing with Emma's increasingly demanding requests for weeks and were happy to donate the food and get paid without having to work the event. The hardest part was watching Emma's breakdown. She sat on the steps of the venue in her wedding robe, sobbing while Trevor tried to make phone calls to find an alternative location. Her bridesmaids clustered around her, some crying, others furiously texting to spread the news of the cancelled wedding. My parents kept trying to negotiate with me, as if this was a business transaction they could fix with the right offer. Dad suggested I could still own the venue but honor existing contracts. Mom proposed that Emma could pay me back over time. Neither of them seemed to understand that this wasn't about money anymore. It was about respect. By 5 o'clock, Rosewood Manor was empty except for my staff and me. I stood in the main ballroom, looking at the space that was now mine, and felt something I hadn't experienced in years: peace. The fallout was immediate and dramatic. Emma and Trevor's relationship didn't survive the cancelled wedding. Apparently, learning that his had been financially dependent on her sister while presenting herself as independent was a deal breaker. The engagement ended within a week. My parents were furious, then desperate, then resigned. Without my monthly contributions, they had to face their actual financial situation for the first time in years. Dad picked up extra shifts at work. Mom took a part-time job at a local store. They downsized their lifestyle dramatically, giving up their expensive cable package, their twice-weekly dinners out, their casual shopping trips. Emma moved back in with them, but the dynamics had shifted. She couldn't blame her lack of independence on being between opportunities when everyone knew she'd been living off my money. She got a full-time job for the first time in her adult life. As for me, I discovered that owning a wedding venue was exactly the right career move I'd been looking for without knowing it. My accounting background made the financial management simple, and my years of being taken advantage of had taught me how to set clear boundaries with demanding clients. Rosewood Manor became more profitable under my ownership than it had ever been under the Sterlings. I implemented new policies, upgraded the facilities, and built a reputation for elegant events with professional service. Within 6 months, I was booked solid through the following year. But the best part wasn't the money or the success. It was the respect. Vendors knew I was serious about contracts and deadlines. Clients knew I would deliver exactly what I promised when I promised it. My staff knew I valued their work and would support them against unreasonable demands. For the first time in my life, people took me seriously from the first interaction. My marriage to James, which had started as a strategic decision, grew into something genuine and strong. He'd been supportive during the entire venue purchase process, even when he didn't fully understand my motivations. When I finally told him the whole story, he was amazed by my planning and proud of my strength. "You know," he said one evening as we sat on the porch of our new house, a Victorian cottage just minutes from Rosewood Manor, "I always thought you were too nice for your own good. But you're not nice. You're kind. There's a difference." "What's the difference?" "Nice people avoid conflict even when conflict is necessary. Kind people do what's right even when it's difficult." 6 months after the cancelled wedding, Emma called me. "Sarah, I want to apologize." I was surprised. Emma had never apologized for anything in her life. For what? For everything. For taking advantage of you. For expecting you to pay for my wedding. For treating you like your dreams were less important than mine. What brought this on? A long pause. "I got fired yesterday. From my job. And I realized I have no savings, no backup plan, no skills beyond expecting other people to solve my problems. I've been thinking about how you lived, how you always had money saved, how you always knew what to do in a crisis. I never appreciated that you were taking care of everyone. Emma, I'm not asking for anything. I know you're done helping this family financially, but I wanted you to know that I understand now. What you did at my wedding, it wasn't cruel. It was necessary. We needed to learn how to take care of ourselves. And have you learned to take care of yourself?" "I'm trying. I'm scared, but I'm trying." It was the first honest conversation Emma and I had ever had. We didn't become close friends overnight, but we started building a relationship based on mutual respect rather than family obligation. My parents took longer to come around. Dad was embarrassed by how dependent they'd become on my financial support. Mom struggled with the idea that her baby had been carrying the family for years while she'd praised Emma's carefree lifestyle. But gradually, they learned to appreciate what I'd built. They visited Rosewood Manor and were genuinely proud of my success. They started referring to me as a businesswoman rather than just their practical daughter. They stopped making jokes about my boring life and started bragging to their friends about my accomplishments. The relationship wasn't perfect, but it was honest. And for the first time, it felt balanced. Standing in my venue one year after the cancelled wedding, I thought about Grandma Rose and the advice she'd given me about not letting kindness be mistaken for weakness. She'd been right about everything. My family had needed to learn my worth the hard way because they'd never bothered to see it when I was giving it freely. I learned something crucial about boundaries. They're not walls you build to keep people out. They're gates you control to let the right people in. Setting boundaries wasn't selfish or mean or vindictive. It was survival. Your value doesn't decrease based on someone's inability to see your worth. Your generosity doesn't require you to accept disrespect. Your love for your family doesn't mean you have to sacrifice your future for their comfort. If you've ever been the reliable one, the responsible one, the one everyone calls when they need something but never considers when they're celebrating, I want you to know that your story matters. You matter. Your dreams are just as important as anyone else's, and you have the right to protect them. Setting boundaries changed everything for me. It cost me a relationship with my family for several months, but it gave me a relationship with myself that I'd never had before. It cost me the role of family caretaker, but it gave me the role of successful businesswoman and respected wife. Most importantly, it showed me that quiet strength isn't the same as weakness. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is stop accommodating people who take your kindness for granted. If you've ever been underestimated or taken advantage of by people who should have cherished you, I want to hear from you. Subscribe and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Your story matters, and you deserve so much more than you're accepting. Don't wait for your 30th birthday or your inheritance or the perfect moment to start demanding the respect you deserve. Start today. You're worth it.